What's up, you guys? In today's video, I'm gonna break down my first true real estate investment property where I bought a 4-unit multifamily deal for $125,000 up in Milwaukee, a neighborhood that I was not familiar with, nor had I had any exposure prior to this. And I'm gonna share with you the process that I followed along the way, some of the resources that I learned, and the pieces I was able to put together in order to make this deal a reality. So whether you're going after your first deal or just your next deal, hopefully some of the things I share with you today can help you in your goals as well. So let's get into it. All right, so let me set the backdrop for this story and this deal and how it all came to be. So this was actually the third property I've ever bought. The first two that I bought were actually primary residence where I did what most people would call a house hack. I lived there for some period of time, I fixed it up, and then I rented it out. So this was not new to me in the sense of getting into real estate, but it was new to me in the sense of this was my first true outright purchase for investing purposes, and I actually did it out of state, which is, if you've never done it before, a challenging task, especially when you don't know the neighborhood itself. So with this deal, again, I knew the mechanics, I knew how to run the numbers, but it was the first time I was able to really put the pieces together, start to finish in executing. I had a plan to buy a multifamily real estate property, to actually closing, getting it rented, getting it managed by a third-party management company, and getting things running and stabilized. And so that's what we're gonna get into today. Now, leading up to this deal, what kind of got me to this place was I started realizing how big of an impact real estate was having on my life. The two properties I had prior were appreciating, they were growing, and it was actually adding to my net worth. And I eventually realized I need to figure this thing out. And sure enough, I came back to BIGGERPOCKETS, a website I'd visited before, but this time I kind of got hooked into their podcast. And as I was renovating my second place that I lived in, I was just nonstop consuming BIGGERPOCKETS podcasts and learning from show after show, putting the pieces together, learning from other people's experience. And from that, I was able to draw my own conclusions about a strategy that I wanted to outline and how I wanted to go after it. And so that's what I wanted to go through today. So step number one was finding a place, right? And getting very clear about what it was that I wanted. I think one of the hard things in real estate, or especially if you're new to this, getting acclimated to, well, where do you start? How do I start? Everyone kind of comes in with different means, different know-how, different markets, and you got to get really clear about what it is that you're after and how you're going to go after it. So the first thing for me was to figure out what kind of market could I actually play in. I was most familiar with probably the Metro Detroit area, also very familiar with Chicago, which is where I live now, very expensive market, and not somewhere where I thought I could actually execute the strategy I wanted to. Now, if you follow along with a lot of the kind of best practices in real estate, you're looking for the 1% rule. So basically, is the rent roughly 1% of the purchase price of the home? And it's really hard to find markets in which the actual rents relative to a purchase price are going to meet that 1% rule. And so that's the first place I started, is looking for markets that I could actually achieve this in, and I didn't feel like it was my backyard. So where this led me to was Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fortunately, that's only about an hour and a half from the Chicago market, and I felt like it was close enough I could drive to if I had to go explore, investigate, do my homework, and understand the neighborhoods, the market, and really actually go implement this strategy. And sure enough, the rents are really strong there. The home prices are relatively low. And in a lot of cases, as I was looking at deals, the numbers just made sense. So I got really clear on what it was that I wanted. I wanted a 2 to 4 unit building in the Milwaukee area. I drove up there and literally went zip code by zip code, driving streets and mapping out areas that were either good neighborhoods or bad neighborhoods. And I literally took notes on every zip code that I drove through and understood if I was looking at a house on Redfin or Zillow or some of these websites, I knew if that was a place I wanted to be or not be in. So I knew exactly what I wanted, 2 to 4 units. I wanted somewhere between, I figured, to call it 75,000 to 125,000 depending on the size. And I wanted it in a subset of zip codes that I knew were good. And that's all I went after. Any agent that I talked to, any banker I talked to, anywhere I was searching on any of these MLS sites, That's what I looked for, and I got very clear. The benefit of doing that is it filters out all the noise and the stuff that you are not looking at. You're not looking at single family. You're not looking at, eightplexes. You're not looking at things that are kind of out of the scope of what you're actually able to take down. And getting focused was the first thing that kind of got me down that path. Now, in order to execute on this plan, I literally had to come up with an action plan. If you follow any people in the space, you know that it requires you taking massive action in order to make things happen towards your goals. And so I needed a literally step-by-step action plan. And so once I got clear on what I wanted, I got clear on what I had to do in sequential order after that. So 1, for me, find an agent. 2, find a lender. 3, find a property manager that was going to help me manage this place. And then 4, just kick off the process, kick off the search with those people in mind and actually start down the path. Now, if you actually listen to Bigger Pockets podcasts, David Green does a number of interviews where he talks about the core 4, and that's essentially what I relied on in order to establishing this plan. I needed my agent, I needed my lender, I needed my property manager, and I forget the 4th one already. Contractor, that's it. In this case, the property manager was also able to outsource the contract and was going to be able to help me renovate the place that I needed to renovate. So I had at least the people lined up and a plan of like what I wanted to do. So as soon as I found that property, I was able to execute the plan. Got those people in place. Now, what I eventually learned in the process, it took way longer than I anticipated to find the first place. It actually took closer to, I think, 6 months before I actually found a good deal. The market was heating up at that point. A lot of the numbers that I was underwriting for properties just did not make sense. But with that out there, with an agent out there looking for me, sure enough, an off-market deal popped up through another property manager that he had known. So that's what gets us to the deal at hand. Ended up being a 4-unit building. I was able to get it under contract for $125,000. That property will rent on average per unit $700 per unit. They're all 2-bedroom, 1-bath, rent for $700. So you're talking $2,800 a month on a $125,000 purchase. Now, I figured I need at least $10,000 to $15,000 invested in each unit just to get them up to a decent rent quality. And I also had to inherit 2 tenants in 2 of the units. 2 were vacant. So that was the lay of the land when I first went in there. Now, one of the other things I'll highlight in this that I drew again from Bigger Pockets and the Bigger Pockets podcast is, I believe is Alex Felice talks about some of the different financing strategies he used. And I won't get into today, but he actually talks about delayed financing, which it led me down a couple different paths of getting creative about the financing. One of the biggest problems I remember facing was looking at these things, and if I wanted to put X number of dollars into it, typically you're putting in 20 to 25% down. You get in there, maybe you're putting another $25,000 in renovations or more into the property, and then you have to typically wait for some period of time to then refi out, whether it's 6 or 12 months. And in Alex Felice's interview, he talks about this delayed financing concept, which allowed me to take down this deal. Basically, what I ended up doing was leveraging equity in my 2 other properties. I took all that equity out. I essentially borrowed that out, used that as cash to then go buy this $125,000 in cash using equity from my other properties. Bought it in cash, closed in cash, paid for the renovations through the management company with some of the remaining cash that I had there. Got through the full renovation, got it rented, and then eventually went to refi immediately after with a bank, and was able to get an actual 30-year fixed mortgage against that property, as well as work towards getting some of that money back out. So what I'll highlight here is, again, just connecting some of these dots from various podcasts and things that you learn. You really have to do your homework and work through it as you go. So one of the things I want to highlight here is about doing your homework. So I wrote this plan down on a piece of paper, and actually not a piece of paper in Evernote, but nonetheless you get the idea. once I made kind of the list of things I needed to execute on, I actually had to go do the work. And what that required of me is literally renting a car, driving an hour and a half up to Milwaukee, going zip code by zip code, taking notes, looking at every different area. This is a theme I hope you take away from this, is like you have to do the homework. In order to get the goals that you're after, whether that's financial freedom, whether it's cash flow, whatever it may be, you got to put in the time, you got to put in the effort. And that's what I did on this case. The same goes in every step of this. When I was looking at property managers, I contacted probably 4 or 5 different property managers. I read reviews on each of the property managers. I reached out to other people through forums like the BIGGERPOCKETS forum and actually got recommendations on the person I wanted to have managing the property. When it comes to a lender, I probably contacted a dozen different lenders looking for the best rates, the best terms. Some lenders will tell you they can't or won't do investment properties, for example, et cetera, et cetera. You need to do the homework and really push past these obstacles as they pop up. Now, one of the other big things I had to tackle in this deal was actually doing renovation and actually managing a renovation. The first 2 properties I ever owned, I lived in there, I did the work myself, and that was within my control because I kind of knew the scope of the work and I had the time to do it on my own, at my own leisure. In this case, that was not what I was going to be able to do, and I was going to have to hire it out, meaning I had to know exactly what I was expecting of them and how much I would expect that to cost me. So again, drawing from as many resources as I could. There's a great book put out there by BIGGERPOCKETS. Also, I believe it's called the book on estimating rehab costs. I forget the exact title, but I will link it in the show notes for sure. That was massively helpful. Basically, it gives you top to bottom what to expect something to cost, whether it's roofing, whether it's drywall, whether it's flooring, and it at least gives you some boundaries of what is reasonable and unreasonable. And I use that as a template. I actually made my own spreadsheet out of it and went through, and essentially all you need to do then is figure out what the square footage is, and you can calculate on average low, medium, high cost of what one particular thing you'd expect to do. So I was able to then build out my scope of work, what I thought needed to be done, how much I thought it'd cost, go to contractors, and then also go to my property manager, have them estimate. And if their estimate came in, I would look at it relative to what I was estimating. And that was my proxy in order to understand, yes, this is a good estimate, good scope of work, good bid, or no, you're way overpriced, try again, or no thanks. And it just so happened to work out. I was able to go forward with the property management company, and they did an excellent job. So once the renovation was done, then it was time to get the place rented, and that's what I relied on the property management company to do. Now, typically, most property managers will be somewhere between probably 8 and 10%, and a lot of times they'll charge you an additional placement fee in order to get new tenants in there. In my case, it was roughly 8% plus 1 month's rent for the new tenants. I inherited 2. They brought 2 more new tenants in, and within probably about a month, we got the place stabilized. We had 4 paying tenants, and everything was good. Now, I have some other stories about the not so great about this property and some of the challenges I've faced along the way. We'll talk about in a different video. But that said, start to finish, I got this deal done. I was able to find the property. I was able to execute on my financing plan. I was able to then execute on the rehab renovation plan of this, and then also complete the renting and the refi of this property and getting it fully stabilized. So let's recap the number. So I bought it for $125,000. I put roughly $25,000 into it. So all in, I'm about $150,000 into this thing. Now, I ended up doing a 30-year fixed mortgage against this property at a 75% LTV. And overall, the property rents for roughly $2,800 a month. So all in, with my 25% of equity locked up, plus the $25,000 or so that I had into the deal, I'm at roughly $58,000 of cash invested. At $2,800 a month, this is making roughly $34,000 a year after all my expenses, which actually maps out pretty well to kind of the 50% rule. My net operating income is right around $15,000 for the year. Obviously, that's after your debt expense. But overall, this ends up yielding right around 15% cash on cash. Now that's if all things go to according to plan and there are no outrageous expenses, which I'll get into in another video. But in the end, I was happy to be able to execute on my very first deal. Just to summarize, what I would take away from this is the biggest things are first getting clear about what it is that you're after. From there, it's about creating an action plan and actually executing on that plan step by step. And for me, it was massively helpful to break things down by incremental, achievable things and just cross those off the list one by one until I finally got to the end. Because at that point, once you lay out the plan, you're just in operation mode, executing on the plan, moving the ball further and further down the field. At the end of it, I was able to land a cash flowing property in a new market and further expand my portfolio. And all of the things that I've learned along the way, I'll be able to add on to the next deal and be able to move that much more quickly. All right, that's all I got for you in today's deal breakdown. Hopefully my story on taking down this first out-of-state multifamily deal is inspiring you to in some way, and hopefully some of these resources will help you in your journey as well. If you got anything out of this today, please smash the like button below. If you want to see other videos like this, please click the subscribe button. Otherwise, until next time.